All right, today we are going to be talking, or I'll be discussing gradients, patterns, and the direct selection tool in Illustrator. So go ahead and follow along. Remember, you can pause and play as you see fit, but I do want you working along with what I'm doing as well, just so that you can get the experience. Okay, so we're going to just go to File, New, and you can just create a new document. And we're going to just be tinkering around today. You can go to Web. You can choose any of these. I'd probably just stick with this web, 1280 by 1024. And you can rename this Lesson 3. And go ahead and click Create. Now you have your document. Now we're going to get a few, we're going to talk about the direct selection tool first. So what I want you to do is go to your shapes tool, and remember, if there's a white triangle in the bottom right hand corner right here, right, you can see a lot of these tools have it. If you hold down your cursor, it just shows you that there's tools embedded in that tool. So there's a lot more tools than just what you see here. If you hold down your cursor or hold down your mouse, you can see that other tools that are embedded with it open up, right? So I just want to give you the heads up with that. So with the rectangle tool, let's go to the shape tool and go to rectangle tool, and go ahead and make a rectangle, right? And the direct selection tool, and I'm just going to color this in. I'm going to use the fill, color it in, color of your choice, and maybe the stroke. We'll do a different color. Okay. Now, the direct selection tool is right here. A is the shortcut command, and what the direct selection tool does is you can manipulate the shape. So the shape is composed of anchor points. You can see if you click on an anchor point, right, that connects a line. The line connects two anchor points together. You can see that this square has 4 anchor points, right? And I can click on one and it'll turn blue and it'll highlight it, and then I can click and drag and I can manipulate that shape, okay, using the direct selection tool. The selection tool right here, I could just move it, and then I can also use these bounding boxes to kind of manipulate it. But with the direct selection tool right here, right, I can click on an anchor point, make sure it's selected, and then I can manipulate it. So go ahead and manipulate that as you see fit, right? Next, what I want you to do is I want you to go to the ellipse tool, and I want you to, let me exit out of that, make an ellipse. And this time, when you use the direct selection tool, if I click right here, you'll see that the anchor point is highlighted, but you have these handles attached to it. So when you have your path connecting two anchor points together, but when it's curved, you get these handles, and if you click on this handle, you can manipulate the shape. So click on these handles and you can pull and stretch and kind of customize the shape, right? And you can still move, right? You can still move your anchor points as you see fit. But now with the curve, you can use these handles and you can stretch them out. You can kind of play around and see what the relationship is with pulling them out, pulling them in, and then rotating them as well. Okay? So that's the direct selection tool, right? Which is this tool right here. So we've tinkered around with a square and ellipse tool. Now patterns. Let's say I wanted to color this in. Instead of a solid color, a solid fill, I wanted to include a pattern. Well, if I go to Window and I go to Swatches, right, and I get my swatch library up, you can see that there's a few, actually let me get the fill in. You can see that there's some patterns here, right? But there's also a lot more patterns you can choose from. If you click down at the bottom of your swatches panel right here and go to patterns, right, there's a handful of options. Let's say nature, animal skins, and that pulls up a variety of different patterns you can choose from. There's foliage that you can choose from as well, right? And there's others as well you can, go from as well, but just wanted to show you patterns. You can even create custom patterns as well. Later on down the line, if you want, you can create custom patterns. You can create like a pattern and then save it as a pattern into your swatches library, which is pretty cool. And next, after patterns, I wanted to go over gradients. Now I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to just create a rectangle. And instead of a pattern, we're going to do a gradient. So this is the gradient tool right here. If I click on the gradient tool right here, just like with patterns, there's a few gradients in your swatches library, right? And a gradient is just a change from one color to the next, right? And you can see that, here's an example, here's another example right here. But there's a huge library of gradients as well. If I click down here, actually, let's just go to Window and go to Gradient, right? You can get your gradient box up. Let's do that. And what you can do is, there's two options. There's actually two types of gradients. There's a radial, right, where it's coming out, creating a circle and going out. And there's also a linear gradient as well. And you can use a slider, and you can see how it's changing, right? And you can use this and it changes the degree in which it fades from one color to the next, right? You can see that. You can customize it by double-clicking right here. Double-clicking, and you can customize the colors. Custom gradient, you can switch that over. If you want to add another color, you can just click down below and it'll add a point, and you can create custom gradients. You can change the angle right here. You can change the angle of the gradient as well, right? So there's a lot of different options to play around with. Opacity, right? You can play with the opacity of individual color points too. One option, if you don't want to do that route, if you click on the gradient tool right here, right, it creates this line right here, and you can move this line, and you can also do the same adjustments that you did here, but you can actually do it on your shape, which is pretty cool. So let's say I wanted to add a color, I could just click down. Oop, I screwed that up. Let's go back. I can click right here, and I could adjust it. If I wanted to adjust the color, I can just double click and create a different color. Let's see, what else? You can just click on another point, and it'll click down below it, and it'll add another point, and then double click, so I can just start creating like a custom gradient. Double click right there, right? And then I can shift these sliders. You can always go back right here, and you're like, well, I want a radial gradient, right? Now I have a radial gradient, and I can adjust this and manipulate it like so. If you wanted to adjust that. So there's a lot of different options going on with the gradient tool, which is kind of cool. Definitely worth playing around. Create a shape and create some custom gradients. Get familiar with the gradient tool. It's pretty powerful.